problem that the Surrealists had with psychoanalysis. The notion of repression is constitutive for psychoanalysis. If there is no, or Freudian psychoanalysis at least, and later Lacanian psychoanalysis, if there is no repression, there is no unconscious. If there is no primary repression, the unconscious does not come into existence for Freud. So, repression is necessary. The Surrealists, on the other hand, saw the unconscious as a liberating force. They saw unconscious desire as a liberating force from the constraints of sort of bourgeois, civilized Parisian life. They did not want to constrain the unconscious. They did not believe in repression. They wanted to do away with repression completely. All right? And saw this as a way to blow apart kind of middle class, civilized life as they knew it in Paris at the time. This was a complete anathema to Freud. You can see these sorts of ideas re-emerging in the work, for example, of someone like Wilhelm Reich in the 1930s and 40s. Reich wrote the book The Mass Psychology of Fascism, very famous sort of early Freudo-Marxist, and again saw repression as one of the key problems of modern societies, and we should do away with that. Again, you see this notion emerging in the 1970s with Deleuze and Guattari, their book The Anti-Oedipus, where again they see desire and conscious desire as a positive force in which to do away with repression. Right? But for Freudianism, this is a complete anathema. So major theoretical differences. The Surrealists actually went to meet Freud. André Breton and Salvador Dali did go and visit Freud in Vienna, and they were appalled by the domesticity of his private life. So although they had a very nice sort of theoretical conjunction between them and saw that psychoanalysis was useful to Surrealism theoretically, they saw Freud himself as a kind of terribly petty bourgeois gentleman and terribly domesticated, and they didn't get on at all well. Okay. This is the first, perhaps fully realized psychoanalytic film then. But again, we can see certain problems emerging with it. And I'd like at this point to be able to sort of say, well, of course, you know, Lacan had a lot to say on Surrealism, and Lacan had a lot to say about this film in particular. Unfortunately, I can't. Much like, okay, one second. Much like Freud, Lacan seemed to have quite a disdain for the cinema. Except, of course, that Lacan himself was closely associated with the Surrealists. In the 1930s, as Lacan was training to be a psychiatrist, he looked set to become a fairly mainstream psychiatrist. He was going through his training, and this appeared to be what the route he was going to take. And then he had two crucial encounters. First, in 1930, he read an article in a Surrealist journal by Salvador Dali on paranoia. Second, in 1931, he began reading Freud. Lacan read the Surrealists first. He read Freud after he read Surrealism. Surrealism offered the young Lacan an alternative route to psychoanalysis, and a crucial link to his clinical practice and psychiatry. Lacan was a friend of André Breton and Salvador Dali, and was later to become Pablo Picasso's personal physician. He attended the first public readings of James Joyce's Ulysses in 1921. It was in this context then that in 1932 Lacan completed his doctoral thesis on paranoid psychosis and its relation to the personality. In 1933, Dali was to refer to Lacan's doctoral thesis in the first issue of the Surrealist journal, Minotaur. And Lacan himself was to make many contributions to Surrealist journals. The link then between surrealism in psychoanalysis and particularly Lacanian psychoanalysis does not come directly through what Lacan might have said or not said about Girard and Deleuze. I don't know if Cyril, you're about to contradict me on that. But certainly what he saw them doing, I think, with the form of the representation. It is not the content, but the form of the representation that was important for him. Okay, did you want to say something, Cyril?
Yes. Basically, I have a question. Because we have heard about suture by J.A. Miller, his recent contribution on psychoanalysis. Can you say something about how suture in comparing with montage in cinema, how is it connect with each other? Would it be, let's say, when one scene combined with another scene, with in between there is a gap? Would that gap be certain kind of suture that you can open up the whole secret of the unconscious?
I'll come back to that later. You're jumping right away to the end of this history I want to tell here. Yeah? Can I come back to that later?
Doesn't matter.
All right.
I used to be something like this.
Yes. Okay. All right. What the Surrealists also did, though, was crucial, was they pointed to the analogy between cinema and dreaming. Right? And this is one of the most persistent analogies in the history that I'm trying to trace here today, the relationship between film and dream. The Lumiere's first experiments were likened to a dream world, and early cinema was frequently described as hallucination and illusion. You probably know Hollywood itself is often referred to as the dream factory, and Spielberg's studio today is called DreamWorks. Right? This is the longest and most persistent analogy that we have. It's also where we find the first, one of the earliest attempts to theorize what might be taking place between film and spectators. Okay? Perhaps early film was an attempt to represent the psychoanalytic act, to represent psychoanalysis and how it took place. The Surrealists tried to use the logic of psychoanalysis to create a film. But what is crucial about cinema, of course, is that it is something that we watch. The experience of cinema is not just what goes on in a writer's or director's mind, it is also what takes place between the screen and the spectator. Okay? The first attempt was to theorize this was made by Bertram Lewin back in 1946, who formulated a notion of the dream screen. Now, according to Lewin, all dreamers, whether they're aware of it or not, project their dreams upon a blank screen, a dream screen, that represents the maternal breast, the first sign of falling asleep into a dream.